Hey guys, a few quick points before this video starts. First of all, this interview was recorded several months ago in the Gun Media office, and they're working with a lot of new equipment, so the audio kind of poor. It seems like only Wes and Nick's mic were being picked up, and me and Ronnie were kind of stuck off, kind of being heard through their mics. So a little bit rough audio, but I hope you can still get through it. I think you can still manage to hear what we're saying. So hopefully that works out. Also, at this time, Project Miliace was still a thing. Layers of Fear 2 was yet to be announced, so questions surrounding that have to do with Project Miliace. And I know, in terms of the lawsuit, everyone is wondering what's going on, where are the new details surrounding it, and this interview doesn't address that. We rarely bring up the lawsuit for very specific reasons. Obviously, at this time, there was nothing to really talk about. So it really wasn't anything interesting to talk about in terms of the lawsuit, but we do get to learn a lot about the guys that brought you the game of Friday the 13th. Wes and Ronnie are really great dudes, the co-creators of the game, if you didn't already know, and it's interesting to see their image and how it came to life in the game, and some of the things that perhaps they had planned that just didn't get to come live. I think it's a fun interview, and if you are a fan of the game, I think you'll dig it too. But yeah, with that, man, enjoy the interview. What's going on, horror fans? Welcome back to another episode of Slashercast. My name is Riley, and that is Nick. And joining us today is Wes Keltner and Ronnie Hobbs in their own little headquarters here at Gun Media. Can you tell us a little more what you do? Nobody introduce yourself better than you can.
What we do? We do game design concepts. That's kind of the basis of what Gun does. But on top of that, we're publishers in both the traditional and somewhat untraditional sense. But sometimes we find other people's games that we think are interesting, and we want to bring those to the market. Maybe they need help in some way, or we are designing, the concept of a new game. That's our own idea or whatever, and then we find the right team that can develop it, which is how Friday came to be. Was Ronnie and I wrote the concept for that game, and then identified the right team to be able to pull it off. Of course, we have to get all the budgets, and the money together, and do the marketing, do PR, do all the other standard things that you might see from a traditional publisher. But most publishers aren't also writing the original concept or whatever for the game, and then we sort of take on more of a role of a director or a producer type of role once the game is in development. We're constantly playing the games and then get back with the dev team and talk through, because you may have great ideas that whenever years before the game is even like one line of code is written, we sit and write these ideas out on paper, right? They sound pretty good, but then you get them into game and you start playing with them and you're like, oh, this isn't that great. Or maybe you have something you didn't put a lot of thought into, but then when you're touching it and playing it, you're like, wow, we need to spend more time on this. Like, this part's really, really fun. We should do that, do more of that. So that's, I guess, the quick answer to who is Gun or what's Gun do. There's not many companies that are like us in existence. Like, you can count on one hand, like how many in the world do similar things that we do.
Traditionally, you're a publisher or developer.
Yeah.
Or kind of.
This
we definitely don't
hybrid.
develop, but we do take on the creating and the producer part.
Right.
Yeah.
It's important to note that you guys are co-creator of Friday the 13th, the game.
Right.
Pretty much everyone knows you. You got especially your mustache.
Yeah, the mustache. Yeah, people definitely they know that.
Mustache guy.
Yeah,
You got a mustache guy and then buff scary dude.
True.
That's why I don't have a mustache, because then.
Yeah, but he has the brains and the brawn though. Like, he gets he comes up with great.
See, Wes
great
is good
concepts.
at giving himself no credit and making you think that everyone else is smart, but it's not true.
I don't do much, right?
So we go back before the Kickstarter and everything with Slasher Volume 1 Summer Camp.
Mm-hmm.
Where did you ever actually see that game going?
Yeah.
If you had never gotten the IP to Friday the 13th,
yeah.
What was the actual plan? Where did you want to take that game to?
Well,
Same plan?
Yeah, it was somewhat of a similar plan. Still an asymmetric horror type of experience.
Probably still 7 versus 1, probably.
Mm-hmm. But we could have experimented with having different killers. Like, there might not have just been one specific killer. We could have made, maybe a few different ones to bring some more, visual variety and maybe gameplay variety from, one having this ability over that ability.
You also would have more freedom. with the killers and then what that killer can do.
Yep.
Because when you have Jason, everyone has a vision in their head what he can do or what he can't do.
Right.
So we had to spend a lot of our time trying to design. Okay, we get to be the ones to figure out what Jason actually sees or hears or how he gets around the map. So with our own unique killer, we probably could have had anything's on the table.
And we could have done a little more with environmental locations. There aren't a whole lot of environments from the film that
aren't wooded.
Right. It's like a campground mostly. I mean, sure, there's New York. There's
even the houses are like in woods.
Right. Yeah. So it ties your hands a little bit creatively whenever we got the license, but still, if you were to strip it all the way back and say like, what's just the kernel of gameplay, it was still somewhat very similar to what we wanted to accomplish.
So in terms of like single player, since F13 is limited to single player challenges and offline bots, if you had the freedom to have your game without having the license, do you know there's a different direction you would take in single player?
We probably wouldn't have done any single player at all.
No.
Okay.
I mean, I feel like single player was only a reaction to
What
Kickstarter and the constant messages that we got. It was like, you have to put single player, you have to do it. So we were just beat over the head with it. I feel like there was a demand for it, so we did it. We weren't planning on doing it either.
Right. I mean, at the time, whenever the game was being, like when summer camp was being concepted out and just sort of discussed, and a lot of times it was just, Ronnie and I over beers kind of conversations, right? He was just smart enough to write stuff down. And where those discussions sort of led was more of like an experiment, because at the time that we were concepting this, and this discussion's been ongoing since a long time. Probably 06, 07 was probably when we first started like, hey, there should be a game like this. And there really wasn't. There wasn't a whole lot of asymmetric games anyway on the market.
Nothing that horror.
Right. And so we were like, is there a market for that? And a lot of that came back to like home internet speeds weren't quite where they needed to be. So you knew like, well, that game just can't really make it. But that's what we had always wanted, was a multiplayer, experience where there's a killer and you're trying to run for your life.
Right. I think one of the most special things the game really brought was bringing in a whole new fan base to that franchise. What is that like, being responsible for creating so many new fans to a franchise that's been around for almost 40 years now?
It's a big responsibility, but it also feels really good to know that the messages that Ronnie and I, and of course Dan, who's handles some of the social front, that we get those messages from younger players, which are supposed to be 17 to play the game. But anyway, we get messages from a younger demographic that says, maybe they've never even seen the films, period. But what their Friday was the game, right? Like that was their first, introduction into that franchise. And so how they experienced it is different. Like they lived it, right? As opposed to when we were kids, we grew up just watching it, right? Like inviting your buddies over and eating Twizzlers till you vomit and watching horror movies all night long, right? Like it's just different, and it's exciting to know that led to that, because those messages we would get were, wow, I just went back and I talked my uncle or whatever into renting me part 3 or whatever of the film, and I watched it, and I was pointing out all the spots that I had died, right, in the game. And that's just really cool that their first experience was the game, and then it led them almost like a gateway into the films.
Also the other side, which is the lifelong fans who message you and go, I've been waiting on this my whole life. It brought us together again. It brought me and my friends back together again that we had as a kid. Now we used to love watching horror films. Now we're playing Friday 13 together, and so there's both sides to that. It's a brand new generation of kids, and then there's the whole diehard followers of Friday 13 and horror that pretty awesome too. So
that was basically the genesis of even summer camp. Was he and I both love those types of films, and we were like, I want to play that,
gonna make a game,
but I don't want to play it by myself. I want I want someone else that's with me, and we're all running for our lives, because we've said this in other discussions before, interviews, etc., where everyone, you sit down with your friends, you watch a horror movie, as soon as the credits roll, everyone looks at each other and like, well, what would you have done? Right? Like, and there's the one person that's like, I would have punched him in the mouth or whatever, right? and now like we wanted to create that sandbox to be like, well, let's see how that works out for you.
You already mentioned that like your hands are kind of tied with the license, that there's only so much you could do. It's a big responsibility. Is there something where you thought it was a really great idea, really creative idea, but because it was Jason, you couldn't like pull the trigger on it?
I don't know.
Well, we have lots of ideas that didn't make it, but something specific like that.
I mean, I recall like a lot of discussions where there might be an idea that's kind of kicked around, but we end up vetoing it because we're like, that doesn't really feel like Jason.
Right.
There was even some kills that we had discussed on mocap floor with Kane, and we would walk him through a few things, and he would go, "That's not Jason. That's not Jason." And we were like, "What would Jason do?" And he would take, kind of 60% of the idea and go, "You should do this instead." That's what Jason would do, and we're like, action. Let's see.
The car's a good example.
Yeah.
So for the longest time, we were trying to figure out how to get Jason to stop the car.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we were like, what would he do? You can't just drive over Jason, or if you could, what would happen? Would he fall down? Would he get back up? So we ultimately landed on the decision him to stand in front of the car and pound it, even though that's a little OP for Jason.
Right.
The alternative is he runs you over, or they run you over repeatedly and you feel weak.
Right.
Yeah.
So we thought maybe stand beside the car and swing your weapon, and he might hit you or he might not, but we never could get hit boxes on the characters to line up right, and if the character dies who's driving, the body would have to fall out. So ultimately, I think we settled on him pounding the car. So that's like the reverse of your question. Right?
Yeah.
He's a little more than what Jason normally do, but also climbing through windows.
Yeah.
Although Jason does climb through windows in some of the early films. It felt weird having Jason chase people through the window in our game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was on the table. Like, should Jason be able to go through windows? And it just felt weird seeing this big hulking killer do that. That's why you can't.
Right.
Even though he does it in part 3, and it's a thing.
Was there ever a point where you guys were like discussing like, should we separate human Jasons and like the undead Jasons? Like you already had your runners and your walkers, but like
we wanted to do all kinds of cool stuff to separate the killers, but ultimately we ran out of time. It was a time and money and a budget thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
to give them unique features and make them slightly more unique.
Even looking at some of the things that happen in the film is tied in with canon, and provide that as like a strength weakness to each one of the Jasons, and almost have like a little narrative, a little storyline, to each one of the Jasons as to, oh, I'm choosing this one, and here's what this one can do, and you could read this almost like a bio or something. It's like, oh, that's why this Jason can't do this, but that other one can, to help educate like more players that maybe don't know the franchise.
Even unique ways to kill. So that was like a big conversation we had. Like, oh, part 6, you can only get him near the boat and wrap a chain around him and do the bolt, or you could drown him. But part 7, you could electrocute. Like we were thinking about different things that you could do, but man, that just blows your feature list out of the water. And for a pretty low budget.
And plus, it's expensive, right, to shoot all of those scenarios, and it becomes, if you give someone, 6 or 7 different potential ways, then everyone is going to want to do those things. So it's almost like you're incentivizing, hey, you should go kill Jason, right? If there's like all these different ways to do it, and so you're funneling gameplay towards potentially
just focus on that, and not the rest.
Exactly, of like forget about the game and just try to go kill him.
Yeah. Don't you hate the guys that do that? It's ridiculous, man.
No, I mean, it's fine because it's not an exact focal point of our game. It's a small part at this point, but if each one had their own way that you can kill them, and that took up a majority of our feature list, then you'd be more apt to do it all the time.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So,
like going off like the whole separating humans and undead Jasons, like adding Roy, like was that a tough choice to make? It's like, we're taking this actually legitimately human Jason and putting him into the game and having the same abilities. Like, was that a hard decision to come to?
I mean, we didn't make it off the cuff. I mean, there was long discussion about it for sure.
I mean, if you really want to get down to it, part 2 and part 3 are human too.
Right.
He never died as a kid. He didn't drown. So 2 and 3.
So they say.
Right.
So says the screenwriters and
right.
So says people who told me.
Right.
Like, he didn't drown. Like that was the whole point. He crawled out of the lake. He lived. Saw his mother get beheaded. He lived in the woods for 20 years.
Yeah.
So part 2 and 3, he's alive. In the part 2, he just takes a hit to the shoulder with a machete. Doesn't die. Part 3, you think he's dead. He goes to the hospital. Eventually, he dies in part 4. But most people don't know that. most people think he's kind of zomboid Jason, even in 2 and 3.
Right.
So I know what you're saying, but we wanted Roy in the game. You know, we really did.
We wanted to try to get as much of a complete Friday
Yeah.
experience as we could.
Yeah, but we didn't have the time to go back and go, oh, he's going to listen to his dead son now instead of Pamela.
Right.
Or we couldn't create a whole new feature list. Like, how's he get around the map and how's he do these things? So,
Yeah.
I've always been really curious in like the decision to have combat in the game and the ability to fight back, and it's like, how hard is it to really find a balance there? And like, I can imagine discussions were insane. Like, how long do weapons, like how long do they break? How long is the health? How will rage stop it? I'm just like, that seems to be still to this day like one of the most discussed things is balance. And it's like it's not bad. It's pretty right on now. It's pretty close. It's like, how do you get to that point?
Well, from a concept perspective, we had a little meatier of a combat system, like what we had originally written. But again, time and money, there's a finish line coming. You got to just,
get the basics.
button up what's there, and maybe you can, make some tweaks and things later to it. But yeah, it's a long process to find balance, because even things as basic as locomotion speeds, right, for counselors, and distances from cabin A to cabin B, there's kind of math and whatnot that goes into that, right? So that the top speed of the fastest counselor that you have, getting from here to here, like how fast they can go, and then the stamina pool, and then having Jason in that mix, that's a difficult balance as well, because you're where we wanted the game to feel scary and sort of faster paces outside, right? Because you're like running for your life trying to get away from Jason, whereas indoor gameplay was a little bit slower and felt more like an inevitability, right? Like you just slowed down, right? He's still going to come through this door and get you. So balance is not just combat; it's also balance in how close are cabins to each other, how close are other like interactions, right? How close? What's the stamina pool when you're swimming across, the longest part of the lake to get to the other side? Like what happens? Like all those little pieces are things that you're constantly, having to tweak and touch and make sure that the end result isn't, totally frustrating, but yet you keep the tension knob turned up as much as you can too. Because we knew where the game was fun was in the near misses, not in the actual being killed, right? Being killed, the time that we took for the cinematic kills felt more like it was the icing on it, right? Like you didn't feel quite as pissed to get killed because you were treated to like a cool looking kill, and you knew it was Kane that was doing it. But it's that those near misses is what makes you want to come back and play again. Is that if Jason almost got you, goes for the grab as you slipped out the window, right? Like those moments, throws a knife and it sticks right beside you. Like those things are what you're like, oh, makes you kind of pucker up a little bit, but then laugh later once you get out of that situation. That was where we found, at least in early play tests, like we saw like, man, this has got something.
There's also the different walk speeds and the run speeds and the out of stamina speed, like the jog. You're balancing that against Jason's top speed, so it's like constant tweaking. And so that goes back to the weapons too, like how fast are they swinging the weapon? So we tweaked that, slowed it, increased it, took it back and forth, like just the right speed at which you can swing a weapon so that the Jason player will have just enough time to block if they're really good. So it was months and months and months of tweaking that. And that just takes all your time up.
And even still when the game was out, we were still having to.
It's also weapon spawns too, like how many weapons are on the map. So you decrease them by 2, then you add 2 more, then you figure out that's too many. Like there's a million different variables that just go into play and lead to an outcome of people teaming up on Jason. Like you can tweak 40 different knobs there, and you may not actually get it right. So.
Based on the way that like you guys play as counselor, like theoretically, if there was like a game mode where there were absolutely no weapons, like do you think that would still be just as entertaining and as fun as a counselor as would be being able to fight back the way you can right now?
Well, I mean, ideally, when we were first looking at combat and weapons and things like that, it was supposed to be more of a like last ditch sort of thing. Like you kind of painted yourself in a corner and you need to fight or flight in this moment.
Defensive.
And yeah, it was very much a defensive type of system that we wanted to get put in there. So if you removed all weapons entirely, I still think it would be fun to play that experience, but I would probably look at maybe some additional like features or mechanics to support that type of gameplay, to like push people towards that, which basically stealth is what you would need to then support. Because if I don't have a weapon, then I need to be better at hiding.
Yeah,
from
hiding
Jason.
better be really good.
So you need to add that as a feature to the game to make that, I think, really work.
We have to decrease the map size, because then we wouldn't have anything to find inside cabins except for, imagine taking all the weapons out.
Yeah.
You spend a lot of the time looking indoors and there'd be nothing there, so you'd be bored. So we have to decrease the map, and then that would work. So you would see Jason more often, but you'd be able to hide better because you couldn't rely on your weapons. So I think obviously it would still work. Other games have done it.
Yeah, your interiors you need to shift a little bit. You need to change some interiors to provide additional props for hiding.
Or maybe a way to
slide
to cover,
snap to cover. That's what I'm
look around stuff, like that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that'd be so cool to see.
Yeah.
I'm just curious how everyone that plays very offensively, I'm really curious where they would go to if they couldn't do that anymore.
Yeah, like would they all hide under beds and would they all get in armoires?
Yeah.
That would be the game.
Yeah.
Right.
If the map is big, it would, because they know that they could.
But I mean, static hiding isn't as fun as far more active, type of hiding, where you can, while still on the move, you're kind of trying to give Jason the slip by using the environment, right?
The map's small enough, you can do that for fun and have fun while you're doing it. Because Jason would at least know where you're at. If it's the same size map, he'd just be morphing around.
Yeah.
It's like you're trying to find that last counselor, and they're hiding under the bed. You're like, where are you? Right? You're hoping they show up on your sense. So.
Just out of curiosity, I think one of the things that makes F-13 so special compared to other asymmetrical horror games that are diving into multiplayer is that the escapes are like much more complicated, as in like fixing a car, fixing a phone box, things like that. It's like, were there any escapes that you really had planned earlier that just couldn't do? It was just too complicated, cost too much to put in?
Yeah, we had other ideas and things that we were kicking around, like a blocked off area, or maybe an area that had like a mechanical gate or something, and then you had to either bring things to it, fix it, repair it, do something.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. Well, I meant more like,
something like that, like the big road, like a road that you can't get to until you open up the gate.
Right.
Like a closed off road. We had more complicated systems too, though. Like we went through a lot of phases of what it takes to actually fix the car, and then what it takes to actually call the police. So those had different levels of complexity.
I always thought it'd be cool to see like an RV. Like the RV from like part 6.
Yeah.
That had a flip over.
Yeah. Or the tractor and driving around. We at one point the vehicles were on rails.
Yeah.
You couldn't drive them.
Oh.
You could drive it, but it was on a spline. It just.
Oh, remember the early was that you had to get in the car and you watched it go away. And hope that Jason didn't kill you.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's something no one knows.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
That's really
And
interesting.
we figured out that kind of sucked. It was boring. So like, let's just drive the cars, and that opened up a whole new
problem.
a
whole set of problems.
It's like Jurassic Park.
It's like you're in the car and you're like, please don't catch me, Jason. Please don't catch me. So,
Right.
it was cool. We had a lot of different variations of that system.
I think one of the things people always forget about you guys is that you're fans too, and like crazy fans. This is why we got really special things like Virtual Cabin, and if you were a fan of the films, like you could spot out things like crazy. I actually asked you a while ago, is like, what Easter eggs are we missing? Of course you won't tell me.
Right.
But, like, apparently we all need to go hunting for Easter eggs.
Is there more that they haven't found?
Yeah, there's
Really?
Well, I'd have to
You
go
have a
back and
checklist in your room?
yeah, I'd have to go back and look, because when we did the engine overhaul,
Something may have gotten messed up.
well, since there was a whole new renderer, everything got touched. So I'd have to go back and check to see.
I know as a fan of the film, that's something I'm like really curious in.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna keep pushing to get that out of you. But like, I think I know both your answers, but like, what is your favorite Friday film?
No, please.
Mine's 3.
Right. For what reasons?
The first time I felt like Jason was Jason. He was human, but he was still bumbling around kind of like an idiot. But he was scary, and the first time he gets the mask, it was just there's some of my favorite scenes in that film too. Like when he's hanging in the barn and she has to open the doors and you see him hanging there. That's like one of my favorite scenes. At the very end, when she's in the wreck boat and she's hallucinating, she looks up and sees Jason looking out the window. Those are just really, really creepy moments that I think those are two of the scariest moments in the entire franchise that like people don't often talk about. It was just really creepy and well done, and it's so corny. It's in 3D and it's a comedy in some aspects, but it's my favorite Jason too. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
My favorite film in the series is Part 6, and it's my favorite. I guess a handful of reasons, but since the creative decisions that were made on Part 5 left some fans, I guess, a little reeling and upset about that wasn't Jason. That's a tough spot for someone to hand you the franchise after that fact and say, hey, get this back on track.
Bring him back to life.
Yeah, right, exactly. And so there was a lot of, I think, some bold decisions, I think, that were made by McLaughlin whenever they tackled that. And the fact that, I think he went back and looked at a lot of the, Universal films, the monster films, and brought some of that to life through Part 6. Both visually, and then there's some more subtle, cues that tie back to that. But there's also a sense of humor to that one, and it was very much tongue in cheek, like right in your face. Everyone's in on the joke, for that one. I didn't care for that Jason. Like if you were to like carve it out, I'd be like, I like that film, but I didn't like that specific Jason. So I think it's a loaded question because for me, it's like I have a favorite film, then I have a favorite, like Jason's look, like the outfit, and then I have my favorite Jason portrayal.
Yeah.
Right. So, and those are all three different answers. So it's like, but if you just said pick a film, I'll be like, yeah, I like 6 because it was a very bold move to try to do that. Right. It took a lot of creativity for them to say, how do we, CPR, bring this thing back out of where it is. And I think a lot of fans were like, all right, sweet. Jason.
It's the first time that Jason. I mean, it's it's the first time you see him after he dies in Part 4. So you literally see him come up from the ground. So
right.
It's totally a monster moment.
Exactly. I mean, Frankenstein, right?
Had a big influence. McLaughlin was like, that was part of his deal, was he wanted it to seem like an old monster movie. So it was cool.
I think true fans of Friday the 13th can admit that it's not the best. Absolutely love it, but we know that things are a little cheesy here, or things like if they had a better budget, they would have been better. Was there any point where, obviously the answer to go to is usually Jason Goes to Hell, is where people kind of just struggle to get that big change. When you were pulling things like that into the game, were you worried that it would be retrieved differently because of that? Because people not liking that film directly, or?
Not necessarily. I wasn't concerned that, if the film wasn't received well, then we're going to struggle to bring some of those elements to life in the game. Like I never had that fear. I knew that there's going to be fan favorite Jasons. There's going to be fan favorite locations and hero pieces, meaning buildings and otherwise signage, things like that from the films that we wanted to bring over into it. So there were some things that we knew we don't need to comb real deep into some of the films because we knew these aren't the best
they might not appreciate
portrayal of Friday.
Probably don't have the Part 7 house, right? But we have Packanack Lodge and Higgins's Head and the Jarvis House and Pinehurst, because those are the more classical settings. But we had to bring the other Jasons in. I mean, what do you do? Not bring in Part 9 and Part 8?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to. So really, we weren't too worried about it.
Yeah, I think for when new content was coming out, I think my favorite part was always the maps. Being Jason, that's cool, but when you change the maps, it changes the game entirely and how people play. What was the most surreal map you saw come together for you?
Well, our first map we ever fully fleshed out was the Higgins map. That's the one that after we prototyped a bunch of different versions that we were let's put all our effort into the Higgins map. After that, I'd say the one I was most proud of is probably, for some reason I like Pinehurst. You know, it's like the way it looks. I like the Jarvis house too. Yeah, it's a lot more fog. It's tougher to see. But I really like those maps. Yeah, for some reason. Yeah. Higgins is my favorite. That's my favorite film. So yeah. I love the barn. You know, I wanted to go upstairs in the barn, but couldn't. So.
That's another thing that'd be really cool to see. Yeah. Like climbing
ladders. Jason climbing ladders.
Yeah. Over multiplayer.
Everyone's going down ladders. Like you wouldn't believe the amount of problems that causes.
Did you ever think about like just adding like stairs to like the barn? Like,
well, then there's no stairs in the barn. Right.
Yeah.
You gotta do it right.
Break it.
There's a stair. I know exactly. And then all of a sudden we're the guys who put stairs in the barn. Yeah. We don't know what we're doing. Right. You see.
Wow.
You see the problem?
There's so many holes there.
It's got to be perfect.
Yeah.
And that's kind of us too, though. So we're like, does Jason climb ladders? Well, he does in the film.
Because even in that scenario, if you just think about a ladder, yeah, we wanted to have a ladder in the barn, but just in that scenario, there are so many different variables. Like the player walks up to the ladder, and let's say it's a prompt ladder, so they hit A or E or whatever, right? And does it then automatically just take them up the ladder, up, they're at the top, and that's the end, or do they control it? Right? If they can control it, then they can stop midway and exploit it. Right now, Jason can't hit them, can't grab them, can't do anything to them.
No one can get down.
And no one can use the ladder system. So then you're like, okay, so you can't do that. Right? You can't let the player control the speed at which they go up and down. So it has to be automatic. Well, if it's automatic, someone stands at the bottom of the ladder and blocks the interact point, or they stand at the top and block the interact point.
Or they both hit at the same time.
Sure, you both walk up and hit go at the same time. It's got to supersede one or the other. Or it did actually one before the other, but the packet was received before, meaning over the internet. So what you see is like this weird, and then a snap rubber band.
Or they're on the top of the barn somehow all of a sudden. It's like, what?
Yeah, something strange, weird thing happens. And then you have to then add Jason into the mix. Like, how does Jason then go up it? Does Jason use the ladder, right? Theoretically, yeah, he did in the film.
He'd have to chase you up and just hang out.
You didn't necessarily see a long shot of, J3 walking up a ladder when he went up there. Like, you didn't see that. You saw him approach, maybe reach for a rung. Yeah. The next scene, he's at the top of it already, right? And you're supposed to do that in film because you're never supposed to make a monster appear human, right? Like you don't show them doing normal things like that, right? Like, so you're also sort of taking away from what makes the myth or whatever, however you want to put it, of Jason by making him like.
But I will say the mocap we have with Kane on the ladder, we have it. Yeah. It looks good. Yeah. We did that over and over until he looked awesome. As awesome as you can think somebody would. He skipped a step, so he like two-stepped it. He would grab it and kind of
really muscle it.
Yeah. I was like, okay, at least we have that, but we never did anything with it because we couldn't solve all the potential problems. So that's why we don't have a ladder in the barn. It's not because we don't know there's a ladder in the barn. Right. Believe me, we know it's there.
I just think it'd be cool to if you could throw someone out on a noose or something like this.
Oh yeah, or you could jump out the top and swing on the rope.
Yeah.
Then it becomes this move to you. Everyone's just running circles.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking. If you can climb the ladder, can you then walk off?
Yeah.
Do you have to take the ladder back down, or can you just jump off the side?
Yeah. There were a lot of problems, but the ladder ultimately killed any conversation after that. Yeah. It was people abusing the ladder system or causing problems. Mm-hmm. We ain't got to worry about anything else because we're not doing it because we ain't getting past the ladder problem.
It's not difficult to, I'm not trying to belittle making games, but it's not difficult to concept and create a game if the player plays in the intended way that you designed it, but they never do it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Never do it. And they find, weird and sometimes interesting, frustrating ways that they want to play the game.
Right.
And so that's the first test of any concept, any idea, any theory is, okay, well, how does the player completely break this? How do they completely exploit this? How do they make this terrible for everyone else? And if it passes that test, then you're like, sweet, let's put it in.
We can continue. Yeah.
If it doesn't, then you're like, well, do we want to sit here for a month and brainstorm every single variable to find a solution to this? Or do you move on to the 700 other things that you want to put in the game?
Yeah. It's a silly question that you have to ask yourself, but it is a real one. How can someone ruin the experience?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
I know. You work backwards and try to solve all the things.
Yeah.
And the other piece of that too is if we were a competitive, if this was not if Friday was a competitive shooter, but if we were making a competitive shooter, then the approach to design is a lot different. But when it's a horror game, then it's so important that everyone, you have to keep that mystique and keep that like fear and tension in those pieces as high as you can. But there's still ways that people find an alternative way to play the game, exploit a mechanic in a different way, and it completely kills like it being scary. Or you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that you have the license to anything, nor are you saying that either.
Okay.
Because you know.
Is this you have like the asterisk bold claim at the bottom of the video? Or,
Yeah, this is where you're gonna start breaking it down, put text all over the screen.
Full of shit. This
Right.
is not real.
Yeah, because otherwise there's gonna be a million comments and shares. It's like, they have the license to this game.
Right. Okay.
But I am curious if you guys could just pick one license party and take it over the video.
We'll both pick one unique one.
I know which one I would
Let's
want
do
to
two each. That way we'll really throw people.
You really throw them off?
This other one, I feel like I know the answer for both.
You go one first, and I'll go one, and you go one.
So, and I assume you mean horror. That's horror, since that's what we're pretty good at doing.
It doesn't have to be. Actually, now I'm curious outside of horror, but we'll do horror.
No, I mean,
yeah, right. You're like, no, never mind. Sorry, guys.
No, I mean, I do have a soft spot for Michael Myers. I do love Halloween a lot. I like it because he's a slow, stealthy, methodical type of killer. And we've spent
It should be. Like that.
We've spent so much time in the world of Friday that that Jason is brutal, beast-like. A little clumsy in his movement, but he makes up for that because of the strength. He kind of has like, that sort of bumbling, sort of thing. Especially, early Jason's. Kane had more of a Terminator type of approach to it, right?
Yeah.
But nonetheless, like I've lived and breathed that for so long that it would be great to look at a killer that is slower and stealthy and much more intimate in the way that they kill, right? Because it's just, while the formula is somewhat the same, like in the films, bad guy, slasher kills a bunch of, kids or teens or whatever. It's not the same though, right? Like how it was shot and the environments and the pacing of it, right? That Carpenter's music versus Manfredini's music is different. And Carpenter plays mostly in a 5/4 count, and he only uses like minimal use of synth here and there, right? And he's like just running a scale. It's very simplistic, and Manfredini's is the opposite of that, right? It's fuller, like his music. Manfredini had a lot of instrumentation that was in it, which made for that presence, right? It like mirrored the presence of Jason. He's big, he's wide, he's all those. It matched the music. And Carpenter's, I thought, matched Michael, right? Like how he moved, looks. He's slender. He's a little. He works the shadows, so the music was minimal to match it. So that would be one that I would be like, man, that'd be cool to touch that because it's so different, right, from where we've been living for so long. You used to do one though.
Yeah, I've already said this probably 45 times. Like Texas Chainsaw Massacre is probably my favorite. I actually may like it even more than Friday. Maybe not almost. So I really want to see that whole dynamic of like him and his family and just the idea of being stranded out in the middle of nowhere is pretty awesome. I mean, it's totally different than Friday though because the family involved. I don't have to explain Texas Chainsaw Massacre to you.
Right.
Would you want to like have a team of killers then? Like you bring in Leatherface, there's one main Leatherface. And like bring like the family, like someone else playing like family.
Well, I think what he was talking about was like Halloween. What makes Michael Myers unique is Leatherface is tied to his family.
Yeah.
I don't know you could do that game if someone made a game without his family. Like to me, it wouldn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
And it's not
tied
saying
to his family.
it's not saying it's true to it.
Yeah.
And the fact that like there's parts of that first film where he's like personifying different roles of the family himself in this weird
he couldn't survive without his family.
Right.
Like we know that. Like he's not all there, and just to see him on a map running around hitting people with a chainsaw, no, that'd be stupid. Like I would never want to do that to him. I would want to like fully embrace everything we did. So that's my favorite film. One of my favorite films ever made, but also one of my favorite horror films. So
yeah.
time for a corner.
The corny one?
Corny picks. They're awesome.
Everyone knows I love Return of the Living Dead.
Oh, yeah.
But zombie games are overplayed. Like there's a dime a dozen, you find them anywhere. But I still love that franchise.
It's different enough, though.
Because to me, it's not really. I mean, it's not a horror movie to me. Like it has horror elements, but I find myself smiling the whole time I'm watching it, more than I'm like thinking about. I mean, even I remember the first time I even saw it as a kid. I remember being somewhat scared, but when you're a kid, like dark, flashing lights, scary music, you're scared, right? It's not. But I remember like probably the second or third time that I watched it, I remember thinking like, this is not even close to scary. Like this is actually kind of comical, and the characters that were there, and they embraced this like punk sort of vibe, both in the characters on screen, the music that's in it, but even some of the like just the filmmaking of it, kind of just this whole vibe of like it's just kind of punk, and it's sort of flipping the finger to like other zombie, other ways to make a zombie movie, right? Like they did different. They kind of went into counterculture, and I thought that was interesting. And plus, it takes place in supposedly it's a real story, right? True story. So it takes place
right down the road
in Louisville, Kentucky. So for us, we're like, oh, and I remember seeing as a kid, like, wow, this really happened, like right in my backyard.
They might come to me.
Right.
Like I'm an hour away. How much take zombies and have to get to me?
But I wasn't smart enough to know, like, at the end they drop a nuke on it,
but
right?
We weren't affected by that,
right,
even though we're an hour away.
Right.
Like, yeah. So I'm gonna leave it to wear Tremors.
Oh,
wow, that'd be interesting.
Wouldn't it?
I don't even know how you could do that.
I do.
I
I
already know.
You got the pitch ready.
You seen the Quiet Place?
Yeah.
Okay. We can piece it together. I don't know. It'd be fun. I always thought it'd be cool to be like running from something you can't see it.
Mm-hmm.
Like you might be stranded somewhere and you really don't know where it's at. So you and your team are trying to get out.
Mm-hmm.
You step on the ground, you get pulled under.
I mean,
and you go check it out. Go.
because it's got a similar like vibe to Jaws, where when Jaws is up on the back of the boat eating Quint, that's when that moment happens. It was for me. I wasn't like scared. I was like, no, not Quint. Oh, he's so awesome. I was more scared when you couldn't see him. He's like, right, he's under the water, and the music itself is telling you it's coming. And it's like this inevitability, and you're like, it like makes you like uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Tremors, I think, kind of borrowed some of that formula, but then took it in a more there's a little, it was far more comedy, in Tremors, a little more lighthearted, obviously, than Jaws. Wasn't shot as seriously, so to speak.
And not as good.
Yeah, but still, it's an interesting pick to think about, and that's where I think that there's some real brilliance in it. Is not seeing the killer until it's like right there. That's far scarier, right? You know it's coming, but you don't see it.
Send your friend out to Pilla's that house over there.
Mm-hmm.
I'll wait here.
Yeah, on this rock.
I'll distract him over here.
They always say the scariest thing is the unknown.
Yeah. It is, absolutely.
Because your brain, right? Your brain is the one that
starts filling the blanks with all your past history.
There ain't nothing as twisted or effed up as your own thoughts.